Hi, everybody. I'm Nate Wiggum. I'm with Ian Capital. We do commercial real estate capital advisory, debt and equity placement across all property types all over the country. And I'm here with Adam Greenfader.
Thanks, Nate. Adam Greenfader here, managing partner of AG&T. We are real estate developers and advisors. We focus on residential and hotel properties in the Caribbean, Latin America, and Puerto Rico.
Today, we're going to talk about Puerto Rico, but specifically in the context of bringing back critical manufacturing to the U.S. and how Puerto Rico traditionally has fit into that equation and what the opportunity around that really is today. I'm sure, over the last few years, people hear Puerto Rico in the news, they hear about the bond crisis and issues with borrowing and the economy and all that. Let's just touch on that for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really kind of what got Puerto Rico into the mess. It all really started in 1996 with the expiration of what they call Section 936. And that 936 was a manufacturing incentive that contributed to, close to 50% of Puerto Rico's GDP at the time was manufacturing based. So it really hit hard in Puerto Rico. The 90s were this time of globalism. It was a time where, NAFTA was created and the United States was increasing its, relationships with Canada and Mexico, and the European Union was formalizing. And so we really saw on a global scale the world moving into these big blocks and to internationalism and globalism. For Puerto Rico, from a geopolitical perspective, the Berlin Wall was coming down and the Cold War with the Russians was ending. So Puerto Rico was losing, on two fronts, from a geopolitical perspective and from an economic perspective. So 936 is phased out. It took 10 years for it to happen. And at the time, the world is becoming more national and international. And so all these pharmaceutical companies that were in Puerto Rico, US companies, in America, manufacturing for America, they started going to Ireland and China and Mexico. And I remember seeing the ads on TV. I mean, Ireland promoting manufacturing and great tax incentives, and companies started to leave. And so while we were all in Puerto Rico, I was living there at the time, and we heard that it expired, and there wasn't people marching on the street, and there wasn't, this clamor for, God, how do we repeal something without a replace? It just kind of, went under the table. It was a small tax act. I mean, it didn't take a lot of congressional effort. It was just written in and written out. And that's when the problem started. As you can see on this chart, Puerto Rico's economy in the early 90s was, humming along at a 2.5% to 3%. But by the time it started to hit, 2003, 2004, the economy was already shaking, basically because of September 11. But by 2006, Puerto Rico was in full-scale bankruptcy. The government had been borrowing money throughout those 10 years to kind of make ends meet, hadn't made any significant structural changes that were necessary. I mean, when you lose 20% of your GDP, you better be cutting a lot of government fat, and you better be doing a lot of things. And Puerto Rico didn't do it. So it started to borrow money, and bonds just kept selling, triple tax-free bonds were being sold. Everybody was buying them. Everything was good. But then, Puerto Rico went into bankruptcy. And it all really happened in this 10-year period. I mean, Puerto Rico up to then really didn't have a lot of debt. So this debt that we hear about was really a direct result of this expiration of 936.
Right. So, that kind of stagnation in the economy went from 2016 or 2006 to about 2016. And then, things were getting, not very good, but something really important happened to turn that around, or to begin the process of turning that around, and that is MISA. So why don't we talk a little bit about what exactly that is and what that means now?
Yeah, as we mentioned before, Puerto Rico doesn't have 2 senators and 5 congressmen, and the political problem in Puerto Rico just kept getting pushed down to the next administration. And while everyone tried to make things work, Puerto Rico really didn't have the wherewithal to self-improve or to self-rectify. And, finally in 2016, Puerto Rico's still in the deep depression. I mean, negative economic growth of 1% to 3%, depending on the quarter. The rest of the world had already come out of the crisis, and Puerto Rico was still in it. So Congress passed the Promesa Act, which essentially created this oversight board to control Puerto Rico's economy. some saw it as a complete insult where Puerto Rico lost its independence to control its budget. Others saw it as a welcome relief where the federal government would come in and control the purse strings. So, up until today, PROMESA still rules. PROMESA is still controlling, what money gets spent and is going to be in Puerto Rico until certain benchmarks are met.
Right. And, I think as a result of that, we started to see things turn around. I mean, last year was the first year that Puerto Rico, I think had positive economic growth, I believe, for something like 12 years. And I think at this point, 36% of Puerto Rico's outstanding bonds have been restructured and the rest are being restructured now. And what, PROMESA, one of the probably the most important thing it did was take Puerto Rico into basically a bankruptcy equivalent federal process, which allows for the opportunity to manage and restructure the debt, which they are doing now. And they've had some success doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we could have seen perhaps some more leadership during the hurricane crisis. I think a lot of people were expecting PROMESA to really take a management role, although that's not in the scope of PROMESA. PROMESA has been working diligently to resolve the bond problems. And, a lot of these bonds have been trading significantly higher than expected. The COFINAs and the GEOs, which are really the top two levels of about 12 different levels of bonds, we're trading upwards of 80%, and that was far more than people thought that they were going to get. While the rest of the bonds have yet, to be negotiated, we are expecting, or at least we were before the COVID-19, a resolution this year. This 1% economic growth was really contingent on several factors, which we'll talk about in the next couple of presentations, but it was contingent on some of the recovery money coming in, as well as the bonds being resolved. The bond. Today, right, with COVID, maybe the 219 won't be positive. It'll still be in the negative. I'm not sure yet. We just have to see how this COVID issue plays out.
Right. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this presentation. Hope it was informative. If you're interested in learning more about the opportunities in Puerto Rico, of which there are many, feel free to reach out to either one of us. There's a link below to go to our website to download a copy of the presentation as well.